word to wise. Grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're going to be talking about Inferno number 3 by Jonathan Hickman, RB Silva, Stefano Caselli, and Valerio Sheedy. And in this video, we are finally going to get an answer to the question about what exactly was Cypher doing when he seemingly infected Krakoa with the transmode virus during the events of House of X and Powers of 10. And just as importantly, what do Destiny and Mystique truly know about Moira X in Moira's 10th life? And what's up with Omega Sentinel and why this may not be the same 10th life of Moira X that we originally thought? We're going to talk about all this and more right now, but first, if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button because I post multiple videos throughout the week, plus live stream the Blerd Cave every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, so that way you don't miss anything. Also, if you enjoy the video, I humbly ask that you Hulk smash that like button because it really helps the channel out. That said, let's talk about Inferno number 3. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about with this book is this is a callback to Powers of 10 number 4, and in this callback, it's taking us directly to the time when Cypher was brought to Krakoa by Charles Xavier and was asked to basically set up the whole Krakoan interface to get everything kickstarted so that mutant kind could create the society as we're reading about right now. And of course, we're learning there was a lot more to it. Now, one of the things I talked about originally with the House of X series and Powers of 10 number 4, and even more recently when it was brought up in Inferno number 1, one of the things I talked about was, are we finally getting an answer to exactly what it is that Cypher was doing when he kind of just slyly let some of the transmode virus slip off his arm and infect Krakoa? What was going on there? Because at the time that this happened, we didn't really know exactly what was up with Cypher's arm. We didn't know back then that this was actually Warlock as a whole just masquerading on Cypher's arm to make it appear as though he was a replacement. And even then, we didn't really have much reason to not think anything other than the fact that he was infecting the Krakoan flowers and vegetation all around him with the transmode virus because, once again, we didn't know Warlock was there. But what actually was happening was that he did, in fact, unleash Warlock to interface with the rest of the island, because even though he did feel like this was the mutant dream coming true finally, he still felt it was too good to be true. And Warlock, more specifically, did not trust anything that Charles Xavier was selling. And over the course of the several months leading up to the full-on creation of Krakoa and it fully becoming the Krakoa that we know it is now, Cypher discovered something. We've learned in this issue that the Krakoan flowers that were developed were not something that were specifically developed by anybody on the island, but something that was just a byproduct of Krakoa being allowed to flourish. Because as we posited during the House of X series, Krakoa is a living mutant island that thrives when it feeds on psychic energy. This is why when Charles Xavier would always talk about how everyone kind of has something to give to Krakoa, having millions of mutants living on the island, Krakoa can take just a crumb of psychic energy from each mutant without having to just completely drain and kill one or more entire mutants. In this issue, we learn that this is actually why Krakoa flourishes the way it does now, because it no longer has to hibernate or have to go long periods without any kind of psychic sustenance, which makes a lot of sense. Now, as a result of that, Krakoa has been able to create all these things that we see now: the gateway flowers, the Krakoan medicines, so on and so forth. And in this, we learn that Cypher is talking about one of the flowers, one in particular that was brought up in House of X number 1, and one that has kind of come up surreptitiously throughout the following issues, and that is the No Place flower. Now, for those that don't remember, this is a place that can exist within Krakoa that Krakoa can't monitor, a place that it is, for all intents and purposes, purposes, blind to. And this is something that Cypher wasn't crazy about because he knows how Magneto and Charles Xavier are. He knows that they like to keep secrets. And this is why he actually had Warlock interface with Krakoa way back in the beginning. Warlock is actually a huge part of the island itself, which for all intents and purposes would mean that the transmode virus is a huge part of the Krakoan interface in and of itself, which kind of brings us closer to those ominous future visions that we saw in House of X and Powers of 10, where the Phalanx was being set up as a major threat for all of mutant kind down the road. But it was something that just kind of seemed like, oh, this will probably never happen. It'll never be brought up again because we really haven't seen much to do with the Phalanx and not much more of Warlock than what we're seeing right now. We've seen him kind of pop up here and there, once again, surreptitiously throughout the pages of Vita Ayala's New Mutants, but beyond that, we really haven't seen him very much. And now we know that Warlock has been helping Cypher keep tabs on what Charles Xavier and Magneto are hiding, and it just so happens that all the while that he's been keeping the surveillance, he just recently got information. This kind of takes us back to when Cypher wanted to talk with both Warlock and Krakoa itself about how things were going on the island, and now we know what he's learned. He now knows about the conversation Xavier, Magneto, and Moira X were having about the resurrection of Destiny, and now this has put Cypher in an actionable position because, once again, he already suspected Xavier and Magneto of hiding something. And now he knows that they are. So now there's not just Xavier, Magneto, and of course Emma Frost knowing about Moira X, but now Cypher, Warlock, and Krakoa itself know as well. Now the question is, what is Cypher going to do with this information? Cypher, could he decide that he goes ahead and stays the course with Xavier, Magneto? Will this change or sway how he views what Charles Xavier, Magneto are doing? Is he going to decide to maybe throw in his lot with Mystique or Destiny for that matter, who we're about to talk about here in just a moment? But we're also taking a look at the idea that what if Cypher decides that none of this is good for Krakoa? What if he decides that all these people are bad for Krakoa? Because in a way, he's not entirely wrong. Everybody is kind of doing their own thing. They're going into business for themselves and not really looking out for the best interests of mutants as a whole. It kind of seems like a lot of characters in this, they've lost sight of the dream. Maybe in the very beginning, the early stages, maybe it was really all about trying to make the best mutant nation they possibly could that was fair and balanced for everybody. But in the end, their own personal ambitions got in the way of actually making this a reality. Speaking of things getting in the way, we also know that Destiny is back. She is alive and well. Irene Adler has been resurrected thanks to some sneaky shenanigans that Mystique has pulled off. And in this, we get an idea of exactly what Destiny and Mystique know about Moira X, because as we remember back in House of X #2, Destiny said that she would be able to see Moira X coming, that she would know in any lifetime that Moira existed in, that she would be able to see her, and that she would already know everything she needs to know about her to take her out, that she kind of built herself up to be this mutant boogeyman to Moira X. And we discover in this particular life, Destiny doesn't know anything about Moira. Not yet. When Emma and Destiny speak about the matter, both seem surprised that Emma is even talking about the fact that she met someone by the name of Moira McTaggart. Because as far as everyone believes, Moira McTaggart is dead. If you're actually wondering where in Moira's 10th life did she have time to fake her death, it was roughly around the time of 1994's Excalibur #80, where she became the first human to contract the legacy virus. The best way to think of it is as if it were AIDS or COVID-19, but only directed at mutants. And if I'm not mistaken, Moira McTaggart was the first human by that time to ever contract the legacy virus. What makes this even more interesting is the fact that, of course, Mystique would know that Moira McTaggart is dead, because technically the strain, this new strain of legacy virus that affected Moira McTaggart was created by Mystique. And then we would later find out in X-Men Volume 2, number 108 in 2001, that Moira McTaggart would finally succumb to the symptoms of this new strain of of legacy virus. This is kind of why all of this little callback here is really interesting to me, because of course, why would Mystique think anything else? Yeah, sure, Moira McTaggart is dead. Even Destiny seems to kind of think that it's a silly notion, and as far as they're aware, Moira McTaggart is human, not mutant. So they don't have all this information that Destiny had from those previous lives, or at least that's what they're acting like. I'm not 100% certain that they actually don't know. It's kind of weird because even with that onslaught of visions and everything that Destiny had told Mystique about the future, it seems like there were some things that were left in the dark, or maybe there were some things that just didn't cross over. Maybe, and this is just something I'm guessing at, it's highly likely that Destiny, while yes, she does see the past, the present, and the future, she may actually be limited to only seeing the past, present, and future of her current timeline, not from previous timelines. So that way, even though, yeah, she doesn't actually know anything about the stuff that happened previously, she does know about things that will happen and have happened in her timeline. So I guess that does actually make some level of sense. And it also explains why both Mystique and Destiny are completely surprised by the vision that Emma shows them of Destiny standing by as Pyro is turning Moira McTaggart into a literal Inferno. This actually surprises even Mystique. If she actually knew this already, she is an Oscar award-winning actress. However, I actually do kind of believe that she has no idea. And this is when we learn that they don't know. Mystique and Destiny are completely ignorant to what happened in that timeline, because at first they think it's a vision. Oh, this is just a vision. This is something that will happen in the future. But this is when Emma assures them this isn't something that comes from the future. This is, in fact, something that happened to Moira in her previous life. Now, this is where things take a very interesting turn, because we haven't really ever talked about this before. Yeah, it's been brought up and we've kind of hinted and danced around it, but no character in the Marvel Comics universe has really talked about what happens to those timelines when Moira dies. Because this is where we finally kind of start to see where Emma's allegiances are going to start to swing. Because at this point, right now, Charles Xavier and Magneto, as well as Moira X by proxy, they've alienated Emma Frost. Emma wants nothing to do with them anymore. She doesn't want to feel like they're pawns. She feels used, and she feels as though they don't have mutant kind's best interest at heart, only their own. Now, this also leaves us with Mystique and Destiny, who now have a greater idea of what's really going on now, and they have, for all intents and purposes, all the pieces to the puzzle that they need to figure out even more than they already knew, that they don't want Charles Xavier and Magneto around, and that there was a reason why they tried to keep Destiny out of the picture. But right now, both Emma Frost, Destiny, and Mystique have come to this one conclusion. Right now, Charles and Magneto are pulling all the strings. They basically hold the key to whether or not Krakoa lives on as a mutant nation or dies in a blazing inferno. They control that right now, and it's all hinged upon Moira X. What makes matters more interesting is that they're not worried about someone killing Moira X. They're more concerned about Moira X killing herself and completely undoing everything that's been done. Because when Emma Frost brings up at any moment she can erase everything that we've made, everything we've sacrificed, and all that they love, she doesn't say, oh, someone could come along and kill her and then that would do that. She's implying that Moira has some modicum of control over this, or that if Moira just decided she didn't like the way things were going, she could just kill herself and everything would just be wiped clean. And that's kind of where Mystique and Destiny's heads are at too. But here's the thing I find very interesting in this. She only showed them killing Moira McTaggart, setting her on fire. She didn't show them the whole entire conversation that Destiny had with Moira X, explaining how her powers work, and more importantly, the fact that she only has 10 lives to live, or 11 if she makes the right decisions. Emma doesn't bring that up, so it kind of makes me wonder if Emma is playing both sides against the middle. That's what it kind of feels like, because she makes it very plain. She's not working with Raven or Destiny, and she's not working with Charles or Magneto or even Moira for that matter. The only thing right now that Emma Frost seems to care about right now is probably the fate of mutant kind, but more importantly, her children. She's worried about her children, the Stepford Cuckoos. And she has good reason to worry about them, because there's an earlier point in this book, and I don't want to go way too off in the weeds about this because I want to get back to why Emma, Destiny, and Mystique are potentially going to wind up helping each other out. But first, I do want to bring up the reason why Emma is probably throwing in her lot with them, or at least giving them something that they can work with, because there is something that Destiny brings up about the Stepford Cuckoos that is very interesting. We, of course, see a scene earlier in this book where the Stepford Cuckoos are reunited because at one particular point in time, while they do number at 5, 2 of them had been killed. Now, for those who don't remember, Sophie died in Grant Morrison's new X-Men number 137 in 2003, and Esme would be killed off a year later in Grant Morrison's new X-Men number 149 in 2004. These characters would stay dead for quite some time up until the events of House of X. This is why when we get to House of X number 1 and there's 5 Stepford Cuckoos as opposed to 3, that's the reason why. But something is brought up with them that I thought was really interesting. Right before Destiny and Mystique speak with Emma Frost, Destiny, after they are explained why the Stepford Cuckoos are the way they are, the idea of them being distinct individuals, they are technically the first natural mutant circuit. An interesting conversation comes up talking about distinctions and how there's a difference between them, and that it kind of leads Destiny into asking, well, why does one of them wear black while the rest wear white? And it's because they take turns doing this. And there was even a point in time, and I think this was only when there were just the 3 Stepford Cuckoos, they did actually change their hair so that they would be able to stick out. But they say they do this because it helps other people feel more comfortable. But when Destiny looks at them, she predicts an ominous future for them and telling them what that future is, but not who it's going to happen to. That 2 will find love and 3 will not, and that 1 will be changed forever and severed from the 5 in Otherworld, no less, and one of you will never recover from it. But when they ask which one is it going to be, Destiny just kind of snarkily replies that she doesn't know because, after all, I can't tell the difference because there isn't a difference. But what she's likely alluding to is how we saw in Jerry Duggan's Cable series that in the end, or at least in the future, Old Man Cable still maintains his relationship with Esme. Now, where he is in that future timeline, it could possibly be Otherworld, but I don't think that's going to wind up being the case. Now, the other one could potentially be Phoebe, because we do know that Phoebe just recently broke up with Quinn Quire, and she didn't seem to be very particularly interested in doing so, but it seemed like she did it due to peer pressure from her sisters, which could technically be a thing, because it is stated that they're all more powerful when they are together, and more specifically, closer together. We actually talked about this in my video for X-Force number 25. I go way more granular with it in that video, but I do find it interesting that Destiny brings up that there's no difference between them, because technically the Stepford Cuckoos are created from eggs that were harvested from Emma Frost while she was in a coma by the Marvel Comics character Sublime. So yeah, it gets kind of weird there. But getting back to the stuff going on with Destiny and Mystique, I think the reason why Emma is not necessarily throwing in her allegiance with Destiny and Mystique, but I think they're going to have some kind of a mutual agreement between each other, because at a later point in this comic, Moira is captured by Orcus and taken into custody and being held by them in Terra Verde. Now, if you're wondering how did they find her, I bring this up in my video for Inferno number 2, but I'll just simply say Orcus, thanks to the help of Horde culture, they've learned how to track the Krakoan gates, and whenever someone's traveling through them, and they've been keeping tabs on one particular gate that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and that's the gate that Moira X has been using. And Mystique has this information because she's been spying on Orcus. Despite the fact that Charles and Magneto do catch wind of this, they don't get there in time to actually save Moira. By the time that they actually catch up with Moira in Terra Verde, it seems like someone else has already beat them to the punch. When they get there, there's bodies laid out all over the place. Tons of seemingly dead humans. Something that if Charles and Magneto were able to get back to Krakoa and tell anyone else about, could easily result in both Mystique and Destiny going to the hole. If Sabretooth's actions in House of X number 1 that were addressed in House of X number 6 are anything to go by, or even the more recent issues of Orphan Maker in both Hellions number 17 and 18 are anything to go by, that killing humans is a direct one-way ticket to the hole. Because of the nature of these deaths, I don't think Mystique is solely responsible for them. I wouldn't be surprised if she busted Sabretooth out of the hole to help with this whole debacle. When they finally reach Moira, they don't find a whole Moira X. When Charles initially sensed that Moira was in danger telepathically, he could tell that she was in great pain and that something was killing her. Well, we now know why. It's because her arm had been removed by the people who currently have her, and that's Mystique and Destiny. What makes matters worse is that I think we now know why in Inferno number 1, where we see Emma having resurrected Charles and Magneto. I think we know why this has happened. Because after they discover the arm of Moira X that was left behind, that is when Omega Sentinel and Nimrod arrive with a ton of armed Orcus guards. Some of them even still have S.H.I.E.L.D. logos on. Some of them even have kind of the beekeeper-like suits that we normally associate with AIM, but all of these guys work for Orcus now, and Nimrod and Omega Sentinel, they seem to have completely figured out where their allegiances lie, and it's clearly with the destruction of mutant kind, something that we'll go to here in a minute. But I do want to go back and talk about what is going to happen to Charles Xavier Magneto. This is definitely showing us the lead up to how they got killed and why they were being resurrected in issue number 1. But I think there might be something more to this. I don't think Emma is actually playing into what Destiny and Mystique actually want. I think there might be something deeper, a deeper layer here that Emma's not telling them. And I kind of feel like Emma, while yes, she's setting things up so that they could get more X, the way my mind is kind of leaning is either Emma is playing the long game and that it's something that she's not even telling them about, or she set all this up just to get Charles and Magneto out of the picture, because when she does resurrect them, she does have a bit of a smirk on her face. This is something that I think I even talked about in my video for Inferno number 1 and 2. This actually mirrors what we saw in House of X number 5, where Xavier resurrected all of the X-Men who died on the suicide mission to destroy the Orcus base, as well as the Mother Mold. What is going on here? Is Emma playing both sides? Is she messing with Charles and Magneto's heads? Are they gonna resurrect them but not give them the whole story? Or are they gonna be resurrected to find that Krakoa is not the place that they left it, that there's new management in charge? Like, I'm not really 100% sure what's gonna happen here, because honestly, I feel it could go either way. That said, we do learn a bit more about what's up with Omega Sentinel, and apparently this is actually a setup that lets us know that what could potentially be the final life of Moira X, if she doesn't make all the correct choices, can technically be subverted, because this Omega Sentinel that we have been witnessing since the events of House of X began, she has always kind of seemed as though she knows more than what she's letting on. She kind of has always had this in the know look on her face this entire time, that she realizes how all this is going to play out, how it's going to end, and she's just waiting for the right moment. And that is something that she said in the previous issue when she spoke with Nimrod, that she was just waiting for the right time, and now that right time has come. And what she reveals to Nimrod is that she has time traveled. Apparently, she has seen how all of this is going to play out, and we even kind of get a timeline at the back of this book that kind of helps explain a little bit more about what's going on. But the reason why she's doing what she's doing is because she's seen how everything is going to end. Whereas Moira X has experienced lives where the mutants never win, apparently Omega Sentinel has experienced a future where the mutants actually do win. And I think this is where we're going to learn a little bit more about how the X-Men can actually subvert all of the bad time travel possibilities that could happen that could keep Krakoa from flourishing. Omega Sentinel seems to have the knowledge of how it all works out, even talking about how she actually knew a version of Nimrod, the very same Nimrod before her, that was a flawed version of Nimrod that couldn't cut the mustard. This Omega Sentinel existed in Moira's 10th life, apparently at some point in the far-flung future. Now, she refers to this as a trickster titan, but it very clearly looks like one of the phalanx that we saw in House of X and Powers of 10. And that after all of the waging of war between humans and mutants and post-human and so on and so forth, and then the arrival of the phalanx, apparently whatever this phalanx is, this trickster titan, it sent her back in time. Not only was she sent back to the past, but also a Nimrod was sent back as well, but this one was an incomplete Nimrod. It was considered a flawed Nimrod, and it was sent back in time to try to defeat mutants, but because it was flawed, it ultimately wind up failing. Now, this Nimrod wasn't sent back by the Phalanx or the, trickster Titan, but was sent back by Omega Sentinel. It was supposed to go back into the past, but to what I think might have been a much further point in time. Maybe this was the same Nimrod that was sent back into the past during the events of Uncanny X-Men number 208 back in 1986. We talked about this issue very recently when discussing some things that were happening with Marauders and the resurrection of Harry Leland, who died shortly after that fight. I'm thinking that is where this is actually taking place, where this Nimrod went back and failed, because apparently Omega Sentinel went back to not too terribly long ago and picked up her life working to manipulate Director Devo into creating Orcus in the first place. And in manipulating these events, she helped engineer the creation of the Nimrod that we see now, who is, for all intents and purposes, isn't quite perfect Cell, but is definitely a better version of the Nimrod that we saw before. And originally I thought this might be some allusion to the fight between Apocalypse and Nimrod that happened in Moira's 9th life, but that's actually not the case. This all stemmed from Moira's 10th life, and those events have been shifted and manipulated, so time travel is incredibly possible here. It is a way to maybe fix a problem in regards to, like, okay, well, what if Moira dies? Maybe someone can go back in time and maybe fix what went wrong. Anyways, getting back to Omega Sentinel, in the timeline that she comes from, humans and mutants actually found a way to get along and formed an alliance against post-humans. In this same reality, the post-humans emerged from the vault and were defeated by Apocalypse and the original recipe for Horsemen, as well as Apocalypse's white Genesis that they were laid waste to and completely destroyed. They don't use this exact term, but we do see a creature that's very reminiscent of the Phalanx that we saw in Powers of 10 and how that Phalanx was defeated by a Phoenix Blade. This is technically a reference to, I want to say, Rookshire, who was a Shi'ar host of the Phoenix Force, who I think died just as quick as they showed up. But as you see, Jonathan Hickman is basically bringing all of this full circle. We see nods back to the Phalanx from House of X. We see how he's addressing the stuff going on with Cypher, digging more into what's going on between this weird triangle between Mystique and Destiny, Charles Xavier, Magneto, and Emma Frost, with Moira sitting somewhere in the middle of that triangle somehow, playing with all of this. And it's, I don't know, I have no idea how Inferno number 4 is going to end. As this story keeps going, I'm honestly walking away with more questions than answers every time, which technically that's a good thing. But man, it's just like, wow, where does this end? Honestly, I think, just for just prediction's sake, I am going to say, I think that in the end of this all, we are going to discover that Cypher is definitely not on board with any of this. And he's going to say that he has no confidence in anyone's leadership, not Emma's, not Charles or Magneto's, or even Destiny or Mystique's. I think he is actually going to try and get Krakoa and himself and Warlock say, we're just going to pick up our shit and we're going to take our ball and go home. That's what I think is going to happen with that. As far as Charles and Magneto being resurrected, man, that one's a tougher one to predict. I think that what we're going to wind up seeing is, I think Emma Frost is going to ultimately screw over Charles and Magneto, but at the same time, she's also going to screw over Mystique and Destiny as well, not giving either exactly what they want. I honestly think Emma is playing the misinformation game, and while she may throw in her lot with Charles and Magneto, she may definitely do everything in her power to make sure that Mystique and Destiny don't have free reign on Krakoa. I still feel like she's going to hold back just enough to still pull a one-up on Charles and Magneto and all this. If Emma is working with Mystique and Destiny, it wouldn't surprise me if she made certain that Charles and Magneto don't remember that Mystique and Destiny killed all those humans at that Terra Verde base, or there's also a chance that she finds a way to help them remember that these things happened so that they could present them to the Quiet Council and get Mystique and Destiny removed. There's even also the possibility that Emma Frost is maybe working with Moira X on the slick. Once again, that's kind of playing the ultimate long con, but considering what I just recently read a week or so ago in Frank Cho's Fight Girls, for some reason that idea is fresh in my head. And just given what we've seen Emma Frost do in the past, especially in Jerry Duggan's Marauders, regarding how she is not above manipulating the way people see events, I could easily have seen it as though she decided that she didn't want to work with Charles and Magneto, but maybe decided that she wanted to work with Moira X. I mean, think about it. She kind of did something similar in regards to helping Lord Chantel fake her death in front of Harry Leland and Sebastian Shaw, having them believe that she was killed by a Sentinel when in reality she was just standing off to the side. Sebastian Shaw was just imagining that he was holding Lord Chantel. I could easily see Charles and Magneto walking away thinking that, oh yeah, she doesn't want to work with us anymore. But on the slick, Emma and Moira being like, yeah, no, we're just gonna handle this ourselves. It could happen, and I'd be totally in for it. But anyways, Emma read Moira X's mind, so she would know all those things from all the past lives. She seems to have all this information. It seemed like she was not telling Destiny and Mystique everything she knew. And as far as whether or not Omega Sentinel and Nimrod are going to be successful, well, I think they'll definitely wind up killing Charles and Magneto. That much is painfully obvious, but whether or not they'll be more successful beyond this or what's going to happen to Krakoa in the end, hard to say, but we can definitely see the cracks in all of the major players on Krakoa so far. You can definitely see the cracks in Magneto in this issue. You can tell that his faith in the dream is kind of starting to waver, while Charles seems to still be 100% on board. But once again, you can tell Magneto just ain't with it no more. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you Hulk smash that like button and make sure to tell me what you thought about Inferno number 3. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.